Hey guys, SlyTactix here. Welcome to my first optimization guide based around Battlefield 4. In these videos I analyse the visual and performance differences between all video settings in the game, as well as recommend settings for you guys that I believe represent the best balance between the two. Now before I start, I'm very excited as I'll be doing an absolute ton of in-depth Battlefield 4 videos on each weapon, attachment, vehicle and tool, and will hold my first giveaway video at 1,000 subscribers, which will include at least one Battlefield 4 premium key. So make sure if you like the video, subscribe and follow me on Twitter for updates about the giveaway and upcoming videos. We start off in the video options menu. As you can see, DICE has given us an absolute abundance of things to choose from and things to manipulate. Vsync I wouldn't recommend using unless you're experiencing screen tearing or frame pacing issues, in which case I would recommend you to update your video card drivers and Sly or Crossfire profiles initially before using it, as it does create input lag that even the most casual players will pick up on. Definitely don't recommend using that in an FPS game if it can be avoided. Motion blur I do not care for, I'll turn that down. Field of view goes all the way up to 120, which is absolutely fantastic. It's definitely high for even the best of FPS games. HUD size and resolution scale are both adjustable, and you've got color blind adjust, which changes the squad and team and enemy colors to make it more visible if you're having problems with certain colors. Unfortunately I can't test that because I'm not colorblind. Not that that's something that I want to be. Graphics quality and texture quality, texture filtering, etc., all the standard things. And anti-aliasing deferred is pretty much live anti-aliasing, and its MSAA only allows you to go up to 4 in the game, probably because there's very few setups that could actually run it with 8. Anti-aliasing post, which is post-processing anti-aliasing, better performance, not as good texture quality in the result. It can blur it a little bit, but it does. I'm not exactly sure what post anti-aliasing this is, if it's TX or perhaps SMAA. I'll have to try and find out. If I do find out, I'll post in the description below. Either way, I'll test them all for you in a few minutes and you'll be able to see the differences between all of them. If you do have a lower range system, then I'd recommend running the post anti-aliasing on medium or high if you can. Okay, now we'll move on to the differences. First up, if you want to know the specifications of my gaming rig, they're in the about of my channel. The first screenshot we're seeing here is a game on low. That means everything's low, no ambient occlusion, no anti-aliasing, as well as field of view on default. Now if we look at this, the most prominent feature to keep your eye on here is definitely the ocean. It's quite monotone, doesn't have foam as it hits the land, and the textures are quite muddy as well as the shadowing, although the shadowing in the background are quite impressive considering the game's on low. As we move up into medium, the most prominent change, as you can see, is definitely the ocean. It has layers, it's crystal, and it foams as it hits the coast. There's no real improvement in textures. The boxes along the coast there still look quite muddy. The shadows in the background have improved. Now what's interesting, if you look at these particle effects and the flame on the capsized boat, it actually doesn't change throughout the settings, which is quite interesting. I'm assuming that's because the effects that relate to physics and geometry have to stay fairly constant, as it's a synced multiplayer title. Expect this change from low-medium settings to cost you between 11 and 12% in performance. As we move up into the high settings, we can see the ocean detail and layers and waves, foam, still stay the same. The most prominent change here is definitely the textures. They become deeper in colour and more detailed, as you can see on the leaves on the tree on the right, as well as a small plant in the left corner there. Definitely changes colour. The shadows in the distance are better quality, and the draw distance of shadows seem to increase a little bit. As we can see though, the particle effects and the flame effects on the crash boat are still the same. Expect this change from medium to high settings to cost you an additional 13 to 14% performance. As we move up from high to ultra settings, as you can see, the differences become much less pronounced. The textures remain similar. The only differences I can pick up on is the smoke on the left is slightly more dense, and the detail of the shadows in the distance are better. Other than that, I did pick up on geometry differences in the weaponry. The scopes did look more circular without having that jagged effect. Expect the jump from high to ultra to cost you between 2 and 3% performance, so whilst it doesn't offer too much extra eye candy, it also doesn't take too much performance. The next screenshot shows us ultra settings with 2 MSAA. As we can see, the jaggies are considerably smooth in the foreground and reduced in the background. MSAA is great, it's good for texture quality and reducing blurring compared to post-processing techniques. However, it is very taxing on a system. Expect 2 MSAA to absorb 10% of your system performance. As we move to 4 MSAA, we do notice the jaggies in the background are improved. However, there is not much of an improvement considering the 21% performance hit that your system will take. And now we're up to ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is basically the technique of how a game engine renders shadows dynamically. SS is screen space and HB is horizon-based ambient occlusion. I find ambient occlusion quite subjective. I myself don't like it. I don't mind its SSAO implementation in a few titles, however I usually find HBAO is far too overwhelming and makes any areas of dense foliage look muddy and dark unnecessarily. As we can see here, implemented in Battlefield 4, the SSAO looks quite good. It adds a bit of depth to the foliage on the ground. It doesn't, however, add any depth to things in the distance, so any objects that are in the distance, it does not really add to the ambient occlusion of it all. Now expect the jump from Ultra to using SSAO to cost about 2 to 3% performance, while the jump to HBAO to cost an additional 10% over that. Due to the fact that ambient occlusion is subjective, if you don't like it, it is definitely an option where you can save yourself some frames. So it gives you the opportunity to use those extra frames for perhaps more anti-aliasing, higher texture settings, or just to keep the minimum FPS above 60 to make sure you have that smooth, lag-free experience. Now I've investigated the differences between physics, particle effects and destruction, and as I assumed there would be little difference, for which I can see two main reasons. One, because it is embedded into the core of the game engine, and secondly, due to the fact that the destruction must be synchronized due to the multiplayer aspect of it, it would affect the core experience of the gameplay if it changed this. The following videos highlight those similarities. As we have seen, the Frostbite 3 engine is excellent with providing us with good textures, top-notch destruction and gameplay, as well as being very scalable. The following settings are what I recommend to get the best FPS to eye candy ratio. The settings I recommend including Ultra and Ultra texture filtering, texture quality, with the remaining settings up to anti-aliasing deferred on high, then anti-aliasing deferred off and using anti-aliasing in post-processing mode in high. It may make the textures a little blurrier than MSAA, but it takes almost no performance hit and does definitely get rid of those jaggies. I don't mind the ambient occlusion in Battlefield 4. I think the SSAO does a good job. I do not recommend the HBAO though, as it's very over the top as mentioned previously. It kind of makes everything look muddy. Field of view is all personal preference and HUD settings. Other than that, this gives you the best performance to eye candy ratio. I'll post a link in the description for the Excel spreadsheet or document that I use to show the performance differences, as well as any other relevant links. I hope this video helped and made the differences of the settings clear and your decisions easier. Like if you liked the video, comment and voice your opinion if you didn't, subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching and stay curious.